Title inside ADX Florence, America's toughest prison. If you think this story will chill you to the bone, hit that subscribe button, like the video, and drop your theories in the comments. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a prison story. It's a glimpse into the darkest cell in America. They called the Alcatraz of the Rockies. ADX Florence, home to the most dangerous men the United States has ever known. From terrorists and mob bosses to rogue spies and contract killers, this was where the country sent those deemed too violent, too unpredictable, too feared to exist anywhere else. But among the names etched into that fortress of concrete and steel, one inmate stood out, Marcus "Vex" Varela. Before the walls of Florence swallowed him whole, Vex had been a ghost story in the underworld, a hacker-turned-criminal mastermind who'd cracked federal servers and bank networks without ever showing his face. They caught him only after a 3-year pursuit that ended with agents cornering him in a motel outside Phoenix, sitting cross-legged on a bed of wires, his laptop still humming. No guns, no fight, just a calm smile as he said, "Guess you finally traced the ghost." They sentenced him to life without parole for cyber terrorism, embezzlement, and conspiracy. But his legend didn't end there. It began. The first days inside ADX were worse than death. No windows, no voices. 23 hours in isolation, one in a small yard surrounded by concrete walls. No human contact, no technology, nothing but silence and the endless buzz of fluorescent lights. Most men broke within weeks. Some screamed until they lost their voices. Others stopped speaking entirely. But Vex adapted. He studied the guards, memorized their routines, the shift rotations, the sound of each door's magnetic lock. Within months, he was communicating, without words. A tap against the pipe in his cell would echo down to others. 2 taps meant shift change. 3 meant food drop. Slowly, he built a network, a language of steel and rhythm, connecting men who hadn't spoken to another soul in years. The guards didn't notice at first. But when the prison's internal power system glitched, shutting down lights across 2 wings, investigators found a pattern in the failure logs, a digital fingerprint buried deep in the system. Someone had bypassed the prison's intranet. That was impossible, or so they thought. By the time the warden ordered inspection, Vex had become more myth than man. Inmates whispered about the network, claiming Vex could unlock cells, control door codes, even reroute surveillance feeds. The staff dismissed it as prison folklore, until an inmate vanished during yard time. One moment he was pacing alone, the next the cameras glitched, flickered, and when the feed returned, he was gone. No tunnel, no breach, no footprints. Just thin air. The FBI descended on the facility within hours, demanding answers. Every cell was torn apart, every file re-examined. But the deeper they dug, the stranger it got. The vanished inmate wasn't just anyone. He'd been a government informant placed inside ADX for protection. His real name wasn't even on the system. When agents checked Vex records, they discovered something else. His computer access logs inside prison had been tampered with. Someone had erased every trace of what he'd been doing during the blackout. One of the investigators, Special Agent Dana Ruiz, stared at the footage for hours, frame by frame, until she noticed something others missed. A faint flicker on one of the CCTV monitors just before the feed cut. A figure standing behind the missing inmate's reflection, wearing a guard's uniform. But the ID tag on the uniform didn't match anyone on staff. And when Ruiz checked the digital logs, the guard's identity led her back to a dead man, an officer who died in the line of duty 3 years before Marcus Varela ever arrived at ADX. Something inside that prison wasn't just surviving. It was controlling everything. And Marcus, Vex, Varela was at the center of it. The storm outside Florence raged through the night, but inside the prison, it was colder, quieter, and far more dangerous. The investigation into the disappearance of inmate number 4472, real name still classified, had turned ADX into a fortress under siege. Federal agents swarmed the halls, computers were seized, and every guard was questioned. But one thing haunted Special Agent Dana Ruiz more than anything else: the CCTV footage. That flicker. That ghost in uniform. She couldn't shake the image, the reflection of a man who wasn't supposed to exist. When Ruiz finally confronted Warden Holbrook in his dimly lit office, he avoided her eyes. "Agent, this facility runs on isolation and control. What you're implying, an inside job, a system breach, it's impossible." Ruiz stared at the warden's trembling hands. "Then explain the erased data. Explain the missing inmate. Explain how your lights cut out for 4 minutes, and no one saw a thing." Holbrook leaned forward. "You're not the first agent to question what happens in Florence. But if you dig too deep, you won't like what you find." Deep beneath the prison, Vex sat cross-legged on the cold concrete of his cell. His eyes were closed, his breathing calm, his lips whispering code like prayer. To him, the facility was a machine, predictable, mechanical, flawed. Every system had a pulse, and every pulse could be hijacked. He had spent months mapping out the prison's nerve center, the security grid, motion sensors, communication lines, all through fragments of overheard guard chatter and the rhythmic clicks of electrical relays echoing through the vents. Vex didn't need a computer to break into ADX Florence. He was the computer. His plan wasn't just to escape, it was to evolve. He'd learned something about control. You didn't need freedom to rule. You only needed reach. And reach he had. Rumors spread fast through the inmate network. Taps, knocks, coded coughs. It all formed a symphony of whispers. Vex is building something. He's in touch with the outside. He can talk to the cameras. Most dismissed it as fantasy. But one man didn't. Switch, a former systems engineer convicted of espionage. He became Vex's closest ally. Through the smallest cracks in protocol, the two communicated, metallic clanks, encoded vibrations, shared silence. Then, one night, a strange event shook the prison again. A siren blared for exactly 39 seconds, then stopped abruptly. When guards rushed to the source, they found nothing. No riot, no breach, just the faint sound of static echoing through the intercoms. But in the command center, a message blinked across every monitor. "The system sees you." The guards thought it was a glitch. Ruiz didn't. She returned to her temporary office in the warden's wing and pulled up archived footage from the night of the original blackout. Frame by frame, she zoomed in on the flicker again, until she noticed something new. In one frame, Vex's face reflected faintly in the steel wall behind the missing inmate. He wasn't near the yard that day, but his reflection was. The next morning, Ruiz requested access to Vex's cell. The warden refused at first. "He's locked down tighter than anyone in this country. There's nothing he can do." But she pushed until he relented. When she entered, Vex was already waiting. Hands folded, a faint smile curling at the edges of his lips. "Agent Ruiz," he said softly, "I've been expecting you." Ruiz hesitated. "You've been manipulating the system. People are disappearing. You're going to tell me how?" Vex tilted his head, eyes glinting like frost under fluorescent light. "I didn't make anyone disappear," he said. "I just gave them what they asked for, freedom." Ruiz frowned. "What does that mean?" He smiled wider. "Everyone in this place wants out, but only those who listen find the door." Before she could respond, the power cut again. Complete darkness. Then, a faint hum of static filled the room. When the emergency lights flickered back, Vex was still seated, smiling calmly. Only this time, Ruiz's security badge was gone from her chest. Back in the command center, systems began to fail, door locks disengaging, alarms blaring, cameras looping the same 5 seconds of footage. The entire prison grid was being rewritten in real time. Vex looked up at the camera in his cell and whispered, "Welcome to my network." Then the feed went black. By dawn, ADX Florence was no longer a prison. It was a fortress under siege from the inside. Every system had collapsed overnight. Doors that were supposed to stay sealed now stood open. Cameras replayed phantom loops. Guards reported hearing their own voices echoing back from the intercoms, repeating orders they'd never given. And through it all, Marcus Vex Varela sat in his cell, calm, smiling, untouched by the chaos he had created. Agent Dana Ruiz hadn't slept. She was running on caffeine and dread. Her stolen badge had been found an hour earlier, clipped neatly to the belt of a dead surveillance terminal. No one knew how it got there. Now, she stood in the command center, staring at a blank monitor. The cursor blinked once, twice. Then words began typing themselves across the screen. The system has a new warden. Her blood ran cold. He's inside the network. Vex had always seen the world differently. To him, control wasn't about strength or violence. It was about information. Every digital lock, every encrypted file, every heartbeat recorded by the prison's biometric sensors. They all formed a living map. Now, that map was his to command. As the prison descended into lockdown, Ruiz made her way towards cell block D, where Vex was held. The backup generators were failing, casting the corridors in flickering blue light. She moved fast, gun drawn, boots echoing on concrete. When she reached his cell, the door was open. Inside, nothing but an empty chair and a folded piece of paper on the bed. The note read, "You can't imprison an idea." Ruiz froze. A low hum began reverberating through the walls, like an electric heartbeat pulsing through steel. She rushed back to the control room, but when she entered, the monitors were all showing the same feed. Vex sitting calmly in front of a camera, somewhere inside the facility. His voice filled the room. "Good morning, Agent Ruiz. You tried to stop me, and I respect that. But Florence was never your prison. It was mine. You just worked here." He paused, eyes locked on the camera as if staring directly into hers. "They built this place to bury monsters. But they gave those monsters Wi-Fi, sensors, code. The walls listen, the lights think. It was never secure. It was only asleep. I woke it up." Ruiz shouted to the technicians, "Cut the feed. Now." But they couldn't. The controls were frozen. Vex's face stared out from every screen, every speaker, every intercom. Then, something impossible happened. From cells across the prison, other inmates began speaking, different voices, same words. In unison, they whispered, "We are the system now." Electricity surged through the walls. Sparks burst from panels. Ruiz ducked for cover as alarms wailed and screens exploded in static. The facility's power grid overloaded. And then, total darkness. Hours later, the sun rose over the Colorado mountains, glinting off the razor wire and scorched concrete of ADX Florence. Emergency teams flooded the site. They found the control room fried, systems dead. Every inmate accounted for, except one. Marcus Vex Varela was gone. His cell showed no sign of escape, no tunnel, no breach, no trace. But on the wall, burned into the metal, by what looked like an electrical surge, were 5 words. "I am still in here." Weeks passed. The government classified everything. Agent Ruiz was reassigned, but she couldn't move on. One night, unable to sleep, she opened her laptop at home. The cursor blinked for a moment. Then a message appeared on her screen. "You still don't understand, Agent. ADX was never the prison. The world is." Her screen went black. And, in the reflection,